Well, I think it's clear who doesn't really have much of a chance, and that is paradoxically the party that got the most amount of votes, the most amount of seats, which is the conservative Partido Popular or Popular Party, who cannot seem to have a clear path towards forming a government, simply because their natural partners would be the Vox party, the extreme right-wing party. And once you make an alliance with Vox, pretty much every other political party is going to run and hide, and they're not going to want to be part of that particular alliance. So I think they're going to find it very, very difficult. Now, the path for the socialists is not necessarily easy either, but at least there is some way and some math that could make it work. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have to go to the electorate again in November.
Yeah. I'll come back to the chances for the Socialist Party, but Vox had been expected, the far-right party had expected to perform very strongly. What happened?
I think what happened was that they didn't perform necessarily as poorly as one might think. I think the vote compressed by about 3-4%, but I think because the way the Spanish electoral system works, that translated into a lot of seats. And I think what happened was basically that the Partido Popular, the Conservative Party, pivoted to the right because they seemed the main challenge to them to come from the Vox Party. So they basically managed to swoop up a lot of the votes that traditionally would have been to the extreme right Vox Party. However, that has unfortunately left them without any room for maneuver in terms of finding allies across the political spectrum.
Yeah. So let's come back to the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. He took a bit of a gamble, didn't he, calling the snap election. How do you see it having played out for him? As you say, he might be able to cobble together a coalition, but he might not.
I think this is a typical Pedro Sanchez, and this is pretty much something that he's been doing throughout his political career. He fancies himself as something of a comeback king, and he manages himself as the underdog, always managing to achieve victory somehow. And I think he may have pulled the trick again. I mean, a month ago, in the heat of the campaign, it seemed that the Socialist Party was really, out of the race almost entirely. And somehow he managed to really mobilize his base and managed to get the socialist voters out into the polls. And I think that made a key difference. And I think the gamble may have paid off. It was a huge gamble. But I think, again, somehow it seems to always work for Sanchez.
Yeah, it's interesting. The irony is that the pro-independent Catalonia party could be one of those that he needs to bring into the fold, which is interesting because this is a party that, had really been a target for many, many years, with some of their leaders living in outside of the country.
Yeah, it's something it's something bizarre that just happened, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody expected Vox and the far right to be the ones that would hold the keys to the kingdom, as it were. But the way it turned out and how it pans out was that it's actually the smaller regionalist parties in Catalonia who seem to be now holding the keys to the kingdom. And what is even more bizarre is that the share of the vote of these parties actually collapsed. And if we look at the election in Catalonia, for example, the Socialist Party emerged as a surprise victor in Catalonia, but yet these small regionalist parties in Catalonia, and to a lesser extent in the Basque Country, are the ones that seem to be key for a left-wing coalition to work.
So can you imagine potentially leaders like Carles Puigdemont, who's been living in exile, returning to Spain?
I find that very, very difficult to see how Sanchez may be able to do that particular agreement and that arrangement. At the end of the day, what Sanchez can say is that's not my responsibility. That is for the courts and the judicial system. But there could be an arrangement in which, in exchange of certain concessions, the regionalist parties in Catalonia abstain from the vote, and that allows Pedro Sanchez to become prime minister again. The problem would be, of course, becoming prime minister is one thing. Actually running the country and governing with such a shaky coalition is a completely different matter.
Yeah, that's a really good point you make. And of course, Spain is facing so many challenges. You talk of the heat of the campaign. It literally is, just extraordinary times for the country, enduring an enormous heat wave. What are some of the biggest issues that he's going to have to grapple with should he be able to put together some form of coalition?
I think one of the key issues with Spain at the moment, of course, I think the previous government was relatively successful at managing a lot of the crises that happened during this government, particularly the COVID pandemic, obviously, but the cost of living crisis. But I think there's still a lot more work to be done in terms of cultural issues and social issues. The government introduced some policies that were seen as very controversial in some quarters, and these elections do not throw a resounding support for those sort of policies. So I think there's still a lot of work to sort of heal the country and bring some sort of policies that can bring the whole country together. And as we've seen again, Spain seems to be very much a divided country, half and half, left and right, so it's going to be hard to govern that way.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors the rest of Europe, doesn't it? Pablo, really great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.